On October 10th, 1954, a badass was born. Her name was Juliane Kopcke, and what she accomplished was done as a teenager. They say that kids are resilient and can survive far more trauma than an average adult, but being thrown 10,000 feet from a plane and surviving alone in the Peruvian rainforest with nothing but some candy and the clothes on your back, now that's one tough kid. It started on Christmas Eve, 1971. Juliane just turned 17, and her plane was running 7 hours late. In typical teenage fashion, she boarded the aircraft with lots of eye-rolling and extended exhales. The pilots were obviously in a hurry too, and within a very short time, they drove right into a nasty storm. It was pretty clear right away that this wasn't normal. Bags were flying, luggage was falling on people's heads, Christmas cakes were splattering on the floor, and then the lightning strike started. Juliane gripped her mother's hand tightly, and the other passengers began to scream and weep in terror. After a few more minutes, the outer engine erupted in flames and promptly exploded. Her mother said, "This is the end. It's all over." Those would be the last words she would ever hear from her mother. The plane abruptly went into a nosedive, and all Juliane could hear was screaming, then more screaming, then silence. Silence that turned into howling wind flowing through her ears. She was falling outside of the plane, but still strapped into her seat, barreling toward the jungle end over end from over 2 miles in the air. The trees got closer and closer, then blackness. Juliane woke up the following day, having survived her fall from grace and miraculously untouched by the beasts of the Peruvian jungle. She unbuckled her seatbelt and immediately began calling for her mother, but all that responded were the ravenous sounds of nature. Search planes could be heard overhead, but the jungle was much too thick to see. She only had a broken collarbone and a few deep gashes on her legs. Trees apparently make for a very cushioned landing. Now, Juliane did spend quite some time in the jungles of Peru. Both of her parents were zoologists and had a research station about 30 miles away. Fitted with a sleeveless mini dress and one shoe, she began walking. Adding insult to injury, Juliane is nearly blind, and she lost her glasses, of course. Aware of the possibility of snakes lurking with every step, she used her shoe to pat the ground before taking every step to make sure that there weren't any snakes. She found a small stream and decided to wade through it, knowing it was safer than walking through the woods. Within a few short days, she stumbled upon the wreckage. There, she found a couple pieces of candy, which was more than enough to hold her over for a while. On the 4th day, Juliane heard a king vulture landing nearby, which she knew that meant there were bodies nearby as well. Upon turning the corner, she was face to face with 3 passengers strapped in a bench seat that had landed head first, buried 2 feet in the ground. She was frozen with fear, convinced that one of them was her mother. Grabbing a stick, she poked the body and pushed a shoe off. She was relieved to see nail polish because she knew her mother never wore nail polish. Having seen enough, Juliane found a large river and began following the shoreline down the stream. On the 10th day, struggling to walk and on the verge of a breakdown, she spotted a boat on the bank. She went up to the boat and upon further investigation found a path that led to a small hut. There, she noticed the gash on her arm. Juliane could feel something moving around inside of her arm, and when she opened up her wound to look, she found dozens of maggots had made a meat suit sleeping bag and were setting up camp. Remembering a dog she used to have, she grabbed a liter of gasoline from the hut and poured it over her wound. Eager to get away from the gas, the maggots tried to bury themselves deeper into her skin. At this point, Juliane took the time to rip out over 30 disgusting, blood-sucking, prepubescent termites from her arm. She was quite proud of this. Instead of taking the boat to save herself, Juliane camped out near the vessel in the hopes that the owners would return. Apparently, taking a boat from strangers, even when you're on the verge of death, is just plain rude. Well, the Peruvian owners did show up, and when they laid eyes on Juliane, the first thought was that she was obviously a water goddess. A dirty, wet, white girl in the middle of the jungle, she's gotta be. After she approached them and told her story, they calmed down and helped treat her wounds and feed her. After 11 painful days alone in the jungle, Juliane made it back home. Her father was not on the plane, but the other 91 passengers that were all died, including her mother. After a thorough investigation, Juliane's mother was found, and to everyone's surprise, she did not die in the plane crash. She survived just as her daughter had, only succumbing to her injuries days later. Apparently, being a badass just runs in the family. Juliane later recounted that she was hounded by the media and received hundreds of letters from people reaching out to show their love and express what an inspiration she was. Years later, when the dust settled, Juliane moved to Germany and followed in her parents' footsteps, studying biology at the University of Kiel, eventually moving back to Peru to study mammalogy, specializing in bats. Juliane says she's still haunted by what happened to her over 40 years ago, but she feels blessed to be alive, and it encourages her to keep going.